Welcome. You're on the Bible Forum. It is Sunday night. It is the first Sunday in August, and we are here. We've already been through some of the quickie things that get you up to speed. You can go back later in the show, later tonight. You can go back and watch that for yourself. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Dinesh D'Souza's new movie. He's got a new movie out, The Hidden American Story. Dinesh's fairly long commentary, my commentary, I should say, on Dinesh, I got that twisted around, uh, is that because it's really something that every American ought to read. If you can't do anything else, buy the book or go see the movie. You'll see the movie and you'll want to write all this stuff down. You got to get the book. And I say all that because we've lost our way as Americans. Now, I'm going to read to you some of his comments, almost verbatim. And I'm doing that because I don't want to impose my thoughts upon his thoughts, nor do I want to neglect anything that he's saying here. But in the course of this, he is using the term democratic to refer to those people who are in the Democrat Party. I got to call him later today and correct him on that. And I wish you would correct people too. It drives me nuts. There is nothing democratic about the Democrat Party. I've tried to fix it. I know there was a time when Rush tried to fix it. He's given up. He won't call it democratic, but he won't tell you anymore to stop doing it. I guess because it doesn't work. But in this film and the book, it's called Death of a Nation. D'Souza is delving into our own American history. He's showing that the plantation system of the early Democrat Party lives on in systems of heavy taxation, government dependence, and identity politics. That's right. A world of Americans under the age of 60 have no idea what was going on in the late 1800s. They won't teach it to them anymore in schools. And the early 1900s in what we call the South. Now, they do know that the black population suffered during that time period. But what they don't know is that it was the Democrat Party that did it. What this book does is tell the story of how the plantation has defined the Democrat Party from the very beginning. In his earlier movie, Hillary's America, D'Souza showed the Democrat Party as the party of slavery. He says the Southern Confederacy, the Ku Klux Klan, and segregation, all Democrats. He asserts that all of this is undisputed history, something the left rebrands by claiming the Democrats shifted over in time to become the party of civil rights and to support minorities. Part of what this new book and this film is doing is debunking that narrative. And he asks us to consider the Democrat plantation. According to D'Souza, the plantation system of the Democrat Party has gone through 5 phases, starting with the plantations that use black slaves, leading to today's plantation system in which minorities are rendered dependent on Democrat policies using wealth the party takes from American taxpayers. The key shift from the slave system of the South to what we see today as a plantation system started with Martin Van Buren. You all remember Martin Van Buren, right? He was the 8th president of the United States, 1837 to 1841. Van Buren was the leader of the New York Democrat Party. Quote, Van Buren figured out that in the South there are slaves, but in the North there are poor, penniless immigrants pouring into America, the Irish, the Italians, the Jews, and so on. End of quote. And furthermore, according to D'Souza, Van Buren realized that while he couldn't directly use the slave system elsewhere, he could, quote, create a system in which these immigrants could be completely dependent on the Democrat Party, end of quote. The Democrat Party would be the ones to give them their food, to provide them their job references and opportunities, with the occasional help of finding apartments. In exchange, the immigrants would vote the Democrats into power in order to enable them to make money from the U.S. Treasury to finance the programs. And through this system, D'Souza tells us, the northern political machines, which dominated the Democrat Party for more than 100 years, were themselves modeled on the slave plantation. Except that they didn't use black slaves. They used newly arriving immigrants. And under this new plantation system, the Democrat Party conspired to, quote, rip off the taxpayer or the working man, end of quote, in order to finance the programs the party used to buy its votes. Meanwhile, we're told, the immigrant got the short end of the stick because the immigrants were helpless. They didn't know what was going on. They just ran into this Tammany machine in New York, for example, and it controlled their lives. Tammany Hall was the Democrat political machine that dominated New York City politics from the early 19th century to the early 20th century, trading patronage for votes, particularly among new immigrants. As the Democrat plantation system developed, it eventually formed today's plantation system. D'Souza describes this as a multiracial plantation in which the Democrats are essentially trying to reduce every ethnic group to a dependent constituency. I would add that they are trying to manufacture new dependent constituencies. Can you say transgenders? The Democrat social welfare programs financed by heavy taxation have largely targeted minority groups, he said, and have led to the often hopeless situations in today's ghettos, barrios, and Native American reservations. All these places, he tells us, are very similar. They're places where people are poor, where education is terrible, where nobody ever gets ahead, where families are in disarray, and where there's a lot of violence. And along with all of that comes an excessive amount of despair and nihilism, and where the vast, vast majority of people keep voting Democrat. D'Souza said the new film also includes elements from his recent book, The Big Lie. The lie of the fascist right. The core theme of the movie is to refute the race card and the fascism card, he said. The race card is the Democrat idea that racism is now on the right, that it's a phenomenon of the Republican Party and of our current president, Donald Trump, and that the fascism card is the fascism on the right and now a phenomenon of Trump and his fellow conservatives, people who are conservatives in the mold, as it were, of Donald Trump. He goes on to say the movie takes on these two incendiary accusations and pins the racist, fascist tail not on the Republican elephant but on the Democrat donkey. The notions that racism and fascism are elements of the Republican Party rather than the Democrat Party, he said, have been shaped heavily by the left's control of academia and control of the media for nearly 2 generations. He says they have done a lot to muddy these waters. They will say, for example, that because the Nazis were on one side of the war and the Soviet Union was on the other side, it follows that since the communists were left wing and the Nazis, well, they would have to be the right wing. But that's bogus. Communism and Nazism grew from the same soil. They both were rooted in socialist economics. They both appealed not directly to the working class, but to a cadre of militants and revolutionaries, students, lawyers, journalists, ex-military guys. They were the core of Lenin's revolutionary cadre, and they were also the core of both Mussolini's in Italy and Hitler's in Germany cadres. He noted that the main difference between communism and fascism is very, very minor. Communism, for example, pushed for an international socialism, while fascism pushed for a national socialism. It's not a big difference. It's smaller than the difference between, I don't know, Shia and Sunni in the Muslim world, and yet the Shia and Sunni have had bloody battles that go back for centuries against each other. Sometimes groups that are quite similar ideologically have terrible wars based either on fine points of doctrine or for competition over followers. Historically, even direct communist regimes such as the Soviet Union, the Chinese Communist Party, have switched between the ideas of international socialism and national socialism, depending on whatever their current objectives are. D'Souza said another part of the film focuses on debunking misinformation about former President Richard Nixon's Southern strategy and on the violent clashes between Antifa and the neo-Nazis in Charlottesville, Virginia, back in August of last year, 2017. The Democrats will say, well, yes, Dinesh, you are right. The Democrats have this sort of history, but you've got to remember they've changed. The party switched platforms. Nixon converted the Southern racists into Republicans. And then look at Charlottesville. Here you've got these neo-Nazis in Trump hats. So racism today is clearly on the right. And it is with this claim, D'Souza says, we destroy. In the movie. To debunk the claim, D'Souza interviewed neo-Nazi organizer Richard Spencer, showing in the film that Spencer's ideologies are on the left, not on the right. He adds that both in the new book and the movie we show the leftist roots of white supremacy, which is very eye-opening. D'Souza also noted that another neo-Nazi organizer of the Charlottesville riots was Jason Kessler. Kessler has a history of leftist politics. He was an Obama supporter, and he was an Occupy Wall Street guy. He noted that Kessler's leftist history was well known and was even stated on the Southern Poverty Law Center's website. They knew. And Charlottesville newspaper did an expose on Kessler that also detailed all of this background, noting that he even broke up with his girlfriend because she was too conservative. D'Souza says all of this is out there, but our press today won't touch it. They won't touch it because they know that to expose Kessler as a leftist is to undermine the whole beautiful story in which Charlottesville was proof that white supremacy is a Trump phenomenon. Think about it this way. There's no evidence that neo-Nazis or KKK members voted for Trump. No one has ever done an empirical survey that shows anything close to that. So the only proof of something that is taken to be conventional wisdom are a few images drawn from Charlottesville of white nationalists wearing MAGA, Make America Great Again hats and cheering Trump. This anecdote, this handful of people, is supposed to clinch the whole case. And that's why counterexamples are devastating, because the case hinges on so few examples. When it comes to the actual white supremacists and neo-Nazis, D'Souza notes that many of them are atheists and many are admirers of black nationalism, even praising people like Malcolm X. They support this notion of ethnic identity politics. And interestingly, ethnic identity politics is not a phenomenon of the Republican Party. It is all Democrat. In fact, the Democrat Party is based upon it. Dinesh D'Souza was given a full pardon in May of this year, 2018, by President Donald Trump, jailed for exceeding his limits on campaign finance donations to the campaign of Wendy Long for New York Senate and making false statements to the Federal Election Commission. As a side note, if everybody that did that went to jail, we'd have to build new jails. And everybody knows that. Doesn't make it right. D'Souza and others believe he was selectively prosecuted and that his sentence was politically motivated. The charges followed his 2013 film that was critical of former President Barack Obama. The film's title, 2016, Obama's America. When he received a full pardon from Trump, D'Souza said the feeling was absolutely exhilarating. I felt like I got my American dream back. I certainly got my rights back. He noted that when he appeared on CNN for an interview following the pardon, he was told that it took powerful people, including Senator Ted Cruz of Texas and Trump, to get him pardoned, and he was questioned on whether that was a form of favoritism. D'Souza said he answered no, because it took very powerful people like Obama, Eric Holder, and Preet Bharara to get me in the first place. It took some powerful people to get me off because they had to undo what an earlier group of powerful people had done. At least he says that's my take on this whole pardon business. D'Souza said the book's appeal is to the head, to the intellect, but the movie's appeal is to the head and the heart. He believes this is a way to reach people, the visual, and he's excited to have them both. The book version was released July 31st. The film was released August 3rd. It might be worth your while to watch the movie and buy the book.